The pointing finger felt like a blade. Sister Agatha stood rigid in the cathedral doorway, her black habit stark against the grey stone, arm extended toward the cobblestone courtyard where 17-year-old Beatrice Hallow waited with everything she owned, bundled in a worn canvas sack. Behind Sister Agatha, the younger Sister Prudence clutched her rosary beads, eyes downcast, lips moving in silent prayer. The autumn wind whipped Beatrice's brown hair across her bruised cheek, the purple mark still fresh from where she'd fallen or been pushed, though she would never say which. "You will leave St. Catherine's immediately," Sister Agatha announced, her voice carrying across the courtyard like a funeral bell. "The Mother Superior has made her decision. You are no longer welcome within these walls." Beatrice shifted the canvas bag higher on her shoulder, feeling the weight of her 2 dresses, her mother's worn Bible, and the small wooden cross her father had carved before the fever took him 12 years ago. She was 6 then, brought to this convent orphanage, with nothing but those 3 things and a desperate hope that God still remembered her name. "Sister Agatha," Beatrice began, her voice hoarse from crying, "I didn't steal the chalice. I swear before God—" "Enough!" Sister Agatha's hand trembled as she pointed. "Your lies compound your sin. The chalice was found beneath your mattress. Mother Superior Catherine herself discovered it during inspection. You have brought shame upon this house of God." Sister Prudence finally looked up, her young face conflicted. She was only 23, new to her vows, and Beatrice had once caught her humming a folk song while scrubbing floors. But even Sister Prudence said nothing now. Beatrice's throat tightened. She wanted to scream the truth, that she'd heard someone in the dormitory that night, that she'd woken to find the silver chalice glinting in the moonlight beneath her bed, that she'd been too frightened to report it, because who would believe an orphan girl over the word of a nun? But Mother Superior Catherine had already passed judgment. The woman who had raised her taught her scripture, shown her the love of Christ through countless small acts of kindness over 11 years. That woman now believed Beatrice capable of stealing from the chapel altar. "Go," Sister Agatha said more quietly, though her finger remained extended, "before darkness falls." Beatrice turned away from the only home she remembered. The Gothic cathedral loomed behind her, its spires reaching toward the heavy clouds, as if pleading her case to heaven. The courtyard stones were uneven beneath her feet, and her simple grey dress, the everyday uniform of the older orphan girls, felt suddenly thin against the October wind. She had no cloak, no coins, no destination. At the arched gateway she paused and looked back one final time. Sister Agatha had lowered her arm. Sister Prudence was weeping. The cathedral doors closed with a boom that echoed across the empty courtyard. Beatrice walked until her feet bled through her worn shoes. The town of Ashford lay 2 miles from St. Catherine's Convent, and she stumbled into it just as the lamplighters began their evening rounds. The October sky had darkened to bruised purple, and cold rain began to fall in thin sheets. Beatrice pulled her canvas bag close and hurried down the narrow streets, past the blacksmith's shop where the forge still glowed orange, past the general store with its windows full of goods she couldn't afford, past the church, not her church, not St. Catherine's, but another church, where warm light spilled from the windows and she could hear voices raised in an evening hymn. She stopped outside the Mercy Street Church and listened. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." The words pierced her. She pressed her hand against the cold stone wall and wept silently, her shoulders shaking. Was she a wretch? Had God abandoned her for sins she hadn't committed? "Child, are you lost?" Beatrice spun around. An elderly man stood behind her, leaning heavily on a walking stick. His coat was patched but clean, and his eyes were kind beneath thick grey eyebrows. Beatrice wiped her face quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Disturb?" The old man chuckled. "You're standing outside a church on a Wednesday evening. If anything, you're exactly where you ought to be." He studied her bruised face, her muddy dress, her desperate grip on the canvas bag. "Have you eaten today?" Beatrice shook her head. Come. He gestured toward the church entrance. Pastor Whitmore keeps a soup kitchen in the basement on Wednesdays. No questions asked. Just grace offered freely. I can't. You can, the old man said gently. That's what grace means, child. You can't earn it. You can't deserve it. You can only accept it. The church basement smelled like potato soup and fresh bread. Beatrice sat at a long wooden table alongside a dozen other people, day laborers with weathered hands, a woman with 3 young children clinging to her skirts, an old man who muttered to himself while clutching a tin cup. No one stared. No one asked questions. They simply made room for her on the bench and passed the bread basket when it came around. Pastor Whitmore was a tall man in his 40s, with gentle eyes and flour dusting his sleeves from helping in the kitchen. He moved between tables, offering quiet greetings and prayer. When he reached Beatrice, he simply placed a hand on her shoulder and said, God sees you, child. You are known and loved. Beatrice nearly broke down again. Instead, she ate her soup slowly, savoring each warm spoonful, trying to make the meal last, because she didn't know when she'd eat again. The elderly man who'd found her outside, his name was Mr. Edwin Carver, she learned, sat across from her and ate his own soup in companionable silence. Finally, he said, Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Beatrice shook her head. There's a boarding house on Elm Street, run by a widow named Mrs. Dorothy Finch. She sometimes takes in girls who need work in exchange for room and board, laundry, cooking, cleaning. Honest work. He studied her bruised face again. She won't ask where you came from, but she will expect the truth if you choose to tell it. I don't know if anyone would believe my truth, Beatrice whispered. Mr. Carver leaned forward. God believes it. That's the truth that matters most. The rest we'll sort out in time. Mrs. Dorothy Finch was a sturdy woman of 50, with silver hair pinned in a practical bun, and hands that showed decades of hard work. She answered her boarding house door with a dishcloth still in her grip, and studied Beatrice with sharp but not unkind eyes. Mr. Carver sent you. Yes, ma'am. Can you cook? Yes, ma'am. Scrub floors? Yes, ma'am. Handle laundry for 20 boarders? Beatrice hesitated, then nodded. I can learn whatever I don't already know. Mrs. Finch's expression softened slightly. You're honest. That's a good start. She stepped aside. Come in. You look like death warmed over. What happened to your face? I fell, Beatrice said automatically. Or someone pushed you. Mrs. Finch closed the door firmly. Listen, girl, I won't pry into your business, but if someone's after you, a man, a situation, you tell me now. I won't have violence brought to my door. No one's after me, Beatrice said quietly. I was sent away from the place I lived, falsely accused, that's all. Mrs. Finch studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you can stay in the attic room. It's small, but it's clean. You'll work 6 days a week. Cooking, laundry, cleaning, whatever I need. Sundays you're free for church. I pay nothing, but you get 3 meals a day, a roof over your head, and 1 set of work clothes. Fair? More than fair, Beatrice whispered. Thank you. Thank God, not me, Mrs. Finch said briskly. I'm just doing what he asks. Now come on. I'll show you where you'll sleep, and tomorrow you'll start earning your keep. The attic room was indeed small, barely larger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a wooden crate for belongings, and a single window overlooking Elm Street. But it was warm, and it was hers, and when Beatrice finally collapsed onto the thin mattress that night, she wept with relief. She pulled her mother's Bible from the canvas bag and opened it to a random page, desperate for comfort. The book fell open to Psalm 62, and her eyes caught on verse 5. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Beatrice closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness, Father, if you're still listening, if you still see me, please help me. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why Mother Superior believed I was guilty. But I didn't steal that chalice. You know I didn't. Please, Please show me what to do." The wind rattled the attic window. The boarding house creaked and settled around her. And in the silence, Beatrice felt the faintest whisper of peace, not answers, but presence. God had not abandoned her. She slept. The days became a rhythm of work. Beatrice rose before dawn to help Mrs. Finch prepare breakfast for the boarders, 20 men and women who rented rooms while working in Ashford's factories, shops and offices. She learned to cook porridge for a crowd, to fry eggs without breaking the yolks, to brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She scrubbed floors until her hands cracked and bled. She hauled laundry to the wash basins and hung it to dry in the backyard, even when October's cold rains soaked her to the bone. But she ate 3 meals a day. She had a safe place to sleep, and no one at the boarding house looked at her like she was a thief. On her first Sunday, she walked to Mercy Street Church with Mr. Carver, who had taken to checking on her each evening after his own day's work at the mill. Pastor Whitmore welcomed her with the same gentle kindness he'd shown in the soup kitchen, and the congregation, a mix of working families, elderly widows, and a handful of young people, made space for her in the pews without question. The sermon that morning was about the prodigal son. The father didn't wait for an apology, Pastor Whitmore said from the pulpit, his voice filling the small sanctuary. He didn't demand restitution. He didn't ask his son to prove he'd changed. He simply saw him coming from a distance, ran to meet him, and embraced him. That's the heart of God, friends. That's grace. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Before we could clean ourselves up, before we could make ourselves worthy, he loved us. Beatrice wiped tears from her eyes. She thought of Mother Superior Catherine, who had shown her that kind of love for 11 years, had taught her to read using the Gospel of John, had sat with her through countless nightmares after her parents died, had celebrated each small victory, learning to bake bread, memorizing the Lord's Prayer, mending a torn hem with neat stitches. How could that same woman now believe the worst of her? After the service, Pastor Whitmore found her in the fellowship hall, where coffee and biscuits were being served. "Miss Beatrice Hallow," she said quietly. "Miss Hallow, I'm glad you came today. Mr. Carver tells me you're staying with Mrs. Finch." "Yes, sir. She's been very kind." Pastor Whitmore nodded. "Dorothy has a gift for seeing people as God sees them, with all their dignity intact, no matter their circumstances." He paused. "If you ever need to talk about anything, my door is always open. Sometimes carrying a burden alone makes it heavier than it needs to be." Beatrice hesitated. Then she heard herself saying, "Pastor, have you ever been accused of something you didn't do?" His expression grew thoughtful. "Yes, once. Many years ago, before I entered ministry. A man I worked with blamed me for a mistake he'd made. I lost my position because of it." He smiled sadly. "It nearly destroyed my faith, but in time, the truth came to light. And in the waiting, the painful, confusing waiting, I learned that God sees the truth, even when others can't. That was enough." "How long did you have to wait?" Beatrice whispered. 3 years. Her heart sank. Pastor Whitmore saw her expression and added gently, "But God's timing is not always so slow. Sometimes he moves mountains overnight. Sometimes he asks us to trust him in the valley. Either way, Miss Hallow, you are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone." Beatrice nodded, though she felt very alone indeed. On Wednesday evening, Beatrice returned to the soup kitchen to help serve. Mrs. Finch had given her permission to spend 1 evening a week volunteering, saying, "Good works are their own reward, and you'll find healing in helping others." Beatrice ladled soup into bowls, handed out bread, and wiped down tables after people left. The work was simple, but it made her feel useful in a way she hadn't since leaving St. Catherine's. At the convent, she'd helped care for the younger orphans, reading them stories, teaching them their letters, comforting them when they cried for parents they barely remembered. She'd had purpose there. Now she was just a girl with a bruised face and a ruined reputation, working off her room and board. As she was stacking chairs at the end of the evening, the basement door opened, and a familiar voice called down, "Pastor Whitmore, are you still here?" Beatrice froze. She knew that voice. Sister Prudence appeared at the top of the stairs, still wearing her black habit and white coif. The young nun looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn. She descended slowly, and then she saw Beatrice. Both women stared at each other. "Beatrice," Sister Prudence whispered. "Sister." Beatrice couldn't move. Her hands gripped the back of a chair until her knuckles went white. Pastor Whitmore emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Sister Prudence, what brings you all the way from St. Catherine's?" "I need to speak with you," Sister Prudence said urgently. Her eyes kept flicking to Beatrice. It's about a matter of conscience, a matter of truth." "Of course." Pastor Whitmore gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down." Sister Prudence didn't sit. Instead, she turned fully to Beatrice, and tears began streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "Beatrice, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken sooner. I should have been brave enough to tell the truth from the beginning, but I was afraid, and She covered her face with her hands and wept. Beatrice's mind reeled. "Sister, what are you talking about?" "The chalice," Sister Prudence gasped. "You didn't steal it. I know you didn't, because I know who did." The truth came out in fragments. Sister Agatha had been struggling with a secret addiction, laudanum, the opium-laced medicine she'd begun taking years ago for chronic headaches. Over time, the medicine had stopped being medicinal and started being necessary. She'd hidden it well, but the cost had been draining her small personal funds. Desperate, she'd stolen the silver chalice from the chapel, intending to sell it in town. But Mother Superior Catherine had announced a surprise dormitory inspection that same day. Panicking, Sister Agatha had hidden the chalice under Beatrice's mattress. The girl everyone knew was an orphan with no family to defend her. The girl whose voice carried no weight against a senior nun's word. "I saw her do it," Sister Prudence whispered, her voice breaking. "I was coming back from the laundry and saw her through the dormitory doorway. I didn't understand what she was doing at first, but when the chalice was found, I knew, and I said nothing. I was too afraid of Sister Agatha, too afraid of causing trouble, too cowardly to defend you." Beatrice sank into a chair, her legs unable to hold her anymore. Mother Superior believed her. "Mother Superior didn't know," Sister Prudence said desperately. "She still doesn't know. Sister Agatha confessed to stealing the chalice 2 days ago, after you left. But she told Mother Catherine she'd stolen it from the chapel directly. She never admitted to framing you. She's being sent to a facility for her addiction, but everyone still thinks you're guilty." 2 days, Beatrice repeated numbly. "It's been 9 days since I left. You've known the truth for at least 7 of those days. Why did you wait?" Sister Prudence flinched as if struck. "Because I'm a coward," she whispered. "Because I told myself it was too late, that you were probably fine, that speaking up would only cause more trouble. But tonight, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't pray. I couldn't bear the weight of my silence anymore. So I came to find Pastor Whitmore because I didn't know where else to go, and She looked at Beatrice with anguished eyes. "I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed Christ. I let an innocent girl be cast out because I was too afraid to speak." Pastor Whitmore had been listening quietly. Now he said gently, "Sister Prudence, you've taken the first step by coming here. The next step is going to Mother Superior Catherine and telling her everything, exactly as it happened. She'll be so disappointed in me." Sister Prudence whispered. "Yes," Pastor Whitmore agreed. "She will, but she'll also forgive you. And Beatrice's name will be cleared." Beatrice stood abruptly. Her hands were shaking. 9 days of sleeping in an attic, scrubbing floors, believing herself abandoned by the woman who'd raised her, all because Sister Prudence had been too afraid to tell the truth. "Beatrice," Sister Prudence pleaded, "please, I know I don't deserve it, but please forgive me." The words stuck in Beatrice's throat. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rage. She wanted to tell Sister Prudence exactly how those 9 days had felt. The fear, the hunger, the bone-deep loneliness of being cast out. But as she looked at the young nun's tear-stained face, she saw something she recognized, the same terror she'd felt standing in the courtyard with nowhere to go. Sister Prudence had been afraid, paralyzed by fear, and fear made people do terrible things, or fail to do brave things. Beatrice thought of Jesus hanging on the cross, looking down at the soldiers who'd just crucified him, and saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." She thought of Pastor Whitmore's sermon about the prodigal son. "While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." She thought of Mr. Carver saying, "That's what grace means, child. You can't earn it, you can only accept it." And she realized, if she'd accepted grace from God when she didn't deserve it, how could she withhold it from Sister Prudence? "I forgive you," Beatrice said quietly. Sister Prudence looked up, disbelieving. "I forgive you," Beatrice repeated, her voice stronger now. "What you did, what you didn't do, it hurt me. It cost me everything I knew. But holding on to bitterness will only hurt me more. So, yes, Sister Prudence, I forgive you." The young nun collapsed into a chair and sobbed. Pastor Whitmore placed a hand on Beatrice's shoulder and squeezed gently. The next morning, Beatrice woke before dawn as usual to help Mrs. Finch with breakfast. But as she was hauling a bucket of water from the pump, she heard a carriage stop on Elm Street. She looked up, and her heart stopped. Mother Superior Catherine stood beside the carriage, her black habit stirring in the October wind. Her face was lined with exhaustion and grief. She climbed the steps to the boarding-house door slowly, as if each step cost her something precious. Beatrice set down the water bucket and opened the door before Mother Catherine could knock. The two women stared at each other. Then Mother Superior Catherine's face crumpled, and she fell to her knees on the boarding-house steps. "Forgive me," she wept. "Oh, Beatrice, forgive me. I failed you. I should have known. I should have trusted you. I should have—" Her voice broke. "I sent you away. I believed a lie. I abandoned you when you needed me most." Beatrice knelt beside her, not caring that the steps were wet and cold. She wrapped her arms around the woman who had been the closest thing to a mother she'd known since she was 6 years old. "Mother Catherine," she whispered, "I forgive you. I don't deserve it." "None of us do," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her own face now. "That's what grace means." They held each other and wept together on the boarding-house steps while the October sun rose over Ashford and painted the sky with gold. Mother Superior Catherine had come to Mercy Street Church immediately after Sister Prudence's confession the night before. She'd spent hours with Pastor Whitmore, wrestling with her grief and shame, before finally coming to find Beatrice at dawn. "I cannot undo what I've done," Mother Catherine said later, sitting in Mrs. Finch's parlour with tea neither of them was drinking. "But I want to make it right. Will you come back to St. Catherine's? Please? Your place is still there. Your bed is still there. You belong with us." Beatrice hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to return to the only real home she'd known, to the children who needed her, to the chapel where she'd learned to pray. But another part of her looked around Mrs. Finch's boarding house and thought of the life she'd begun building here, the soup kitchen where she served on Wednesdays, the congregation at Mercy Street Church that had welcomed her without question, Mr. Carver's quiet kindness, Mrs. Finch's practical grace, Pastor Whitmore's wisdom. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I need time to think, to pray." Mother Catherine nodded, tears in her eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But Beatrice, whatever you decide, know this. You were never the thief. You were always the child I loved. I'm so sorry I forgot that when it mattered most." Beatrice walked to the cathedral that afternoon. She stood in the same courtyard where Sister Agatha had pointed her away 9 days before, and she looked up at the Gothic spires reaching toward heaven. The stones were familiar, the arched doorways, the stained glass windows that had glowed like jewels when she'd attended morning mass. But they didn't feel like home anymore. She realized with surprise that home wasn't a building. It wasn't walls or beds or familiar routines. Home was wherever you found people who saw you as God saw you, with love, with grace, with unshakable belief in your worth. She'd found that at Mrs. Finch's boarding house. She'd found it at Mercy Street Church. She'd found it in the quiet kindness of an old man with a walking stick who'd simply said, "You're exactly where you ought to be." Beatrice turned away from the cathedral and walked back to Elm Street. That evening, she told Mother Superior Catherine her decision. "I want to stay at the boarding house," she said quietly. "At least for now. I'll visit St. Catherine's. I miss the children terribly, and I want to see them. But Mrs. Finch has given me work, and the church has given me a place to serve, and I think God might have a different plan for me than I expected." Mother Catherine's face showed both sadness and understanding. "Then I will support you in that. But the door to St. Catherine's is always open, Beatrice. You are always welcome, always loved." "I know," Beatrice said, "and that means everything." On Sunday, Beatrice returned to Mercy Street Church. Sister Prudence came with her. The young nun had been granted permission to attend services in town while she completed a period of penance and reflection at St. Catherine's. She sat beside Beatrice in the pew, and when the congregation sang Amazing Grace, both women wept. Pastor Whitmore's sermon that morning was about reconciliation. 2 Corinthians 5 tells us that God has given us the ministry of reconciliation, he said, not the ministry of judgment. Not the ministry of keeping score, but reconciliation, bringing fractured relationships back together through the same grace that brought us to God in the first place. He looked directly at Beatrice and Sister Prudence. When we forgive, we don't erase the wrong that was done. We don't pretend it didn't hurt, but we choose to release the debt, to lay down the stone we might have thrown, to extend the same mercy Christ extended to us. And in doing so, we participate in God's greatest work, making all things new. After the service, Mr. Carver approached Beatrice with a smile. "You look different today, child. Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," Beatrice admitted. "Like I've been carrying a stone in my pocket for 9 days, and I finally set it down." "That's what forgiveness does," Mr. Carver said. "It sets us free as much as it frees the other person." He glanced at Sister Prudence, who was speaking quietly with Pastor Whitmore. "You're a brave girl, Miss Hallow. Braver than you know." "I don't feel brave. I feel like I just chose not to be bitter." "Exactly," Mr. Carver said gently. "That's what courage looks like most days. Not grand heroic gestures, just small daily choices to extend grace when everything in you wants to hold a grudge." Months passed. Beatrice continued working at the boarding house, saving the small wages Mrs. Finch had begun paying her once she'd proven herself invaluable. She visited St. Catherine's every other Sunday to read to the younger children and help with lessons. Mother Superior Catherine always greeted her with tears and embraces, and gradually, slowly, their relationship began to heal. Sister Prudence completed her penance and returned to full duties at the convent. But she never forgot the lesson she'd learned. She became known among the sisters as someone who spoke up for the vulnerable, who questioned rather than assumed, who extended grace first and judgment last. Sister Agatha left the convent permanently to seek treatment for her addiction. Before she left, she wrote Beatrice a letter, shaky handwriting on thin paper, that said simply, "I am sorry. I have no excuse. I pray you can forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it." Beatrice read the letter by candlelight in her attic room. Then she knelt beside her narrow bed and prayed, "Father, help me forgive her. Not because she deserves it, but because you've forgiven me for things I didn't deserve forgiveness for. Let my heart be as merciful as yours." In time, the forgiveness came, not as a single moment of release, but as a gradual softening, a letting go. A choice made each morning when she woke to extend grace rather than harbor bitterness. And in choosing grace, she found freedom. On the first anniversary of her expulsion from St. Catherine's, Beatrice stood in the courtyard where it had all begun. This time, she wasn't alone. Mr. Carver stood beside her, leaning on his walking stick. Pastor Whitmore and Mrs. Finch had come too, along with several members of the Mercy Street Church congregation. Mother Superior Catherine stood in the cathedral doorway, not pointing, but waiting with arms open. And Sister Prudence stood beside her, eyes bright with tears. "Are you ready?" Pastor Whitmore asked Beatrice gently. Beatrice nodded. They'd planned this ceremony together, a small, quiet service of restoration and reconciliation. Nothing grand, just a gathering of people who'd learned what grace looked like in practice, not just theory. Mother Catherine descended the steps and embraced Beatrice. "Thank you for coming back, not to stay. I understand you found your path, but to let us honor you, to let us acknowledge the wrong that was done, to let us celebrate the forgiveness you've extended. I wouldn't be here without grace," Beatrice said quietly. "God's grace first, then the grace of everyone who helped me when I had nothing. I just want to pass that grace along." The ceremony was simple. They stood in a circle in the courtyard and sang hymns. Pastor Whitmore read from Scripture about forgiveness and restoration. Mother Catherine publicly acknowledged the injustice done to Beatrice and asked her forgiveness in front of the gathered witnesses. Sister Prudence did the same, her voice breaking but steady, and Beatrice spoke too. "I used to think home was a place," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "4 walls and a roof, a bed, familiar routines. But I've learned home is bigger than that. Home is wherever people see you the way God sees you, with love that doesn't depend on whether you're perfect, with grace that doesn't wait for you to earn it, with forgiveness that says you belong here no matter what." She looked around the circle, at Mr. Carver with his kind eyes and walking stick, at Mrs. Finch with her practical wisdom and generous heart, at Pastor Whitmore with his gentle strength, at Mother Catherine with her tear-stained face and open arms, at Sister Prudence with her hard-won courage. "You've all given me that kind of home," Beatrice continued, "and I'm grateful. I'm grateful God didn't let me stay bitter. I'm grateful He showed me what real forgiveness looks like. Not because the people who hurt me deserved it, but because He first loved me when I didn't deserve it either." They prayed together, they wept together, they embraced. And when the ceremony ended, Beatrice walked away from St. Catherine's courtyard for the second time, but this time she wasn't alone, and she wasn't abandoned, and she carried no bitterness in her heart. She carried only grace. 5 years later, Beatrice stood in a different courtyard. This one belonged to the Mercy Street Church, expanded now to include a shelter for displaced girls and women. Beatrice ran the shelter, having been trained and commissioned by Pastor Whitmore as a lay minister focused on restoration and reconciliation work. She was 22 now, confident in her calling, at peace with her past. A young woman approached her that October morning, thin, bruised, carrying a canvas bag with everything she owned. The girl looked terrified. "Excuse me," the girl whispered. "I was told someone here might help me. I don't have anywhere else to go." Beatrice smiled gently and gestured toward the shelter door. "You're in the right place. Come inside. We'll get you fed, give you somewhere safe to sleep, and we won't ask questions you're not ready to answer. Fair?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." "I don't need to know you," Beatrice said quietly. "God knows you, and that's enough. Now come on. You're exactly where you ought to be." She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and guided her inside. And as she did, she thought of a verse from the Gospel of Matthew, words Jesus had spoken that had become her life's mission. "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." Grace received, grace given, grace that changed everything.